Welcome to Neural Nexus Podcast, where we explore the hottest topics shaping the world. Let's dive in.
Welcome, everyone. Ready to dive deep into American football? You know, even if you aren't a super fan, there's a ton to learn about this sport, stuff that goes way beyond just touchdowns and tackles.
You got that right. We've got some really interesting sources lined up, ones that explore how football's become woven into American culture, its history, values, the whole nine yards.
Okay, so are you ready to unpack why they call football America's game? Let's go back to the very beginning, way back to 1869, when the first American football game was played. Rutgers versus Princeton. Can you believe it?
Yep. But picture this. It was nothing like the game we know today. Imagine more of a chaotic mix of rugby and soccer, players basically forming a scrum to move the ball. Kind of crazy, right?
Yeah, I've seen some old pictures of those games. No fancy uniforms or high-tech helmets like today. But one thing that really struck me, there was no forward pass back then.
Exactly. And that's where Walter Camp, often called the father of American football, really changed things. He came up with the line of scrimmage, which is basically the starting point for each play, and then the down system, which gives a team 4 tries to move the ball 10 yards.
So those are some of the foundational elements of the game as we know it. But going back to that forward pass, why wasn't it part of the original game?
Well, believe it or not, it was seen as a desperate move, almost unsportsmanlike. Can you imagine? The forward pass, the thing that leads to some of those amazing plays we see, it was once considered like a last resort, just to avoid those brutal scrums.
It's crazy how something once considered like a bad move became such a huge part of the game. It's exciting. It makes you wonder how different the sport would be without it. Could a team even score without passing?
Right. It'd be a whole different ballgame. It wasn't until 1906 that the forward pass was officially allowed, and even then, teams hardly used it.
Speaking of exciting plays and game-changing moments, our sources also talk about college football, where the passion is legendary.
For sure. College football, it's so deeply rooted in the history and identity of lots of communities, especially in some parts of the country.
Oh yeah, I've heard about those historic rivalries,
Mm-hmm.
like Michigan versus Ohio State, the biggest one in college football. Or Alabama versus Auburn, where the whole state of Alabama practically stops for the Iron Bowl.
Yeah, those rivalries are more than just games, you know? They're woven into the fabric of these communities, spanning generations of fans.
And it's not just about the competition on the field either. It's the whole experience of game day, the marching bands, the crazy pre-game traditions, that sea of fans decked out in their team's colors. It's insane.
You're right, and those traditions can be really unique. Take Clemson, for example. They have this thing called running down the hill, where the players, led by their mascot, a tiger, actually run down a hill and onto the field, and it's wild.
I've seen videos, thousands of fans just going crazy. And speaking of massive crowds,
Yeah.
have you ever been to Michigan Stadium, the big house?
It's something else. On game day, it holds over 107,000 fans, making it one of the largest stadiums in the world.
I read somewhere that on game days, it practically becomes like the 7th largest city in Michigan. It just blows my mind. It really shows how college football creates this amazing feeling of shared experience and community.
It's true. From small college towns to these huge stadiums, the passion surrounding college football is something else.
So, from the electrifying energy of college football, our deep dive takes us to the big leagues, the NFL. Our sources trace its journey from its humble beginnings in 1920 to the global powerhouse it is today.
Yeah, it's amazing. The NFL has gone from a small group of teams playing on muddy fields to this multi-billion-dollar industry with fans all over the globe.
And we can't talk about the NFL without mentioning the Super Bowl. It's become more than just a championship, hasn't it? It's a cultural event that everyone watches.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's this massive stage, not just for football, but for entertainment, advertising, you name it. And the halftime shows, forget about it, legendary, with some of the biggest music stars ever.
Oh yeah, like this past year when Rihanna's halftime show broke records with 121 million people watching. It's crazy how the Super Bowl brings the country together,
Wow.
even if it's just for a couple of hours.
And don't forget about the Super Bowl commercials. Companies shell out millions of dollars for just a few seconds of airtime during the game.
They're like mini movies now, with celebrities, crazy special effects. It's wild.
It really is. The Super Bowl is this fascinating mix of sport, entertainment, and marketing, reflecting how American culture has changed. But we can't forget that, at its heart, the NFL is about the players, the athletes who dedicate their lives to the game.
Right. Our sources talk about some of the legends, people like Tom Brady, Jerry Rice, Peyton Manning. These names are bigger than just football, you know?
Totally. They're icons, role models. And it's not just about the individual players, but about those legendary teams that have, like, captured the hearts of fans over the years.
Like the Green Bay Packers, the only community-owned team in the NFL. A real testament to those passionate fans in Wisconsin.
And then you have America's team, the Dallas Cowboys, famous for their history and, of course, their huge following.
It's incredible how these teams and players become part of the story of American sports, inspiring generations of fans and aspiring athletes. But our sources go beyond just the famous players. They also explore how football itself reflects American values.
That's a really interesting aspect. You can see it in the focus on teamwork, that grit and determination you need to succeed, the strategic thinking in every play. Those qualities are often associated with, like, the American spirit.
And it's not just about those traditional values. Football has been a platform for social change too, reflecting how American society has changed.
Absolutely. Like, think about Jackie Robinson's brother, Mac. He broke racial barriers in pro football a year before Jackie did it in Major League Baseball.
And more recently, we've seen players like Colin Kaepernick using their platform to raise awareness about social justice issues. It shows how sports can be a powerful force for change.
It's true. Football has often been a mirror, reflected what's going on in society. And sometimes it even plays a role in shaping how we experience the world, even beyond the field.
You're talking about instant replay, right?
Yeah.
That always blew my mind. Something we take for granted in sports today actually started in a football game in 1963.
Exactly. It's a perfect example of how one innovation can spread everywhere. Instant replay changed how we watch sports, giving us that ability to analyze those key moments, slow motion, different angles, the whole thing.
It's like having a superpower, to rewind and see everything. And it all came from football. But our deep dive doesn't stop at the NFL. We're going to go deeper down to where it all starts, high school and youth leagues.
That's where the love for the game really begins, where young athletes learn the basics and those values that'll stick with them, both on and off the field.
You're right. Our sources really paint a picture of high school football, especially in states like Texas, Florida, California, where it's more than a sport, it's a way of life.
It's true. In a lot of those small towns, especially in those states, high school football is the center of the community. It's those Friday night lights, the roar of the crowd, the school spirit. It unites everyone.
And some of those high school stadiums, those Texas stadiums are insane. I read about one, the Allen Eagle Stadium. It cost a crazy $60 million to build.
It's true. Some of those high school stadiums are like professional facilities. It's unreal. It just shows how deeply football is ingrained in those communities.
It's like a whole other world where high school football is the main event, the source of local pride.
And it's not just about the show either. Those high school and youth leagues are key for instilling those values like discipline, teamwork, leadership in young athletes.
It's about working together towards a goal, pushing your limits, never giving up.
And those are lessons that go way beyond the football field, whether someone plays college ball or not.
But of course, just like with any sport, there are some tough issues that need to be addressed. And our sources don't shy away from the big one: concussions and player safety.
Yeah, over the years, there's been a growing concern about those long-term risks from playing football, especially concussions. It's a complicated issue with serious consequences.
For sure. And it's something that needs to be talked about openly.
Absolutely. We have to acknowledge the risks and figure out how to minimize them while still keeping the spirit of the game alive.
So we've covered a lot, from those early days with those muddy fields to today's massive stadiums. From legendary players and passionate fans to the serious stuff about player safety. It's clear American football is way more than just a game. It reflects American culture, its history, its values, and that enduring human spirit.
You said it. It's a story of evolution, triumph, challenges, and it's always changing.
So, with that in mind, let's take a second to think about what we've learned. What really stood out to you? What questions do you have about this amazing sport? We'll go even deeper when we come back.
Welcome back. It's amazing how a sport can become part of a nation's identity. We were just talking about the Super Bowl before and how it's become something bigger than just a game.
Yeah, it's like a national holiday almost. Everyone's glued to their TVs, wearing jerseys, eating all the snacks, experiencing those crazy highs and lows together.
And you know what? That shared experience is something the Super Bowl folks have really tapped into, haven't they? It's this massive stage, not just for football, but for entertainment, even social issues.
So true. Think about those halftime shows. I mean, they're legendary. We've seen some of the biggest music icons up there: Prince, Beyonce, the Rolling Stones. And that Rihanna this year, her performance was huge.
Yeah, over 121 million people watched just for the halftime show. It really shows you the power of the Super Bowl. It can even draw in people who aren't diehard football fans.
And those Super Bowl commercials, people wait all year to see them.
It's crazy how much they've changed. They're not just simple ads anymore. They're like mini movies with celebrities, crazy special effects. They tell stories, make you laugh, even cry sometimes.
Yeah. And they're not just about selling stuff anymore either. A lot of them are about social issues, promoting good causes, starting conversations.
Exactly. Brands are realizing that the Super Bowl is like this megaphone. They can reach so many people, talk about things that matter.
Speaking of reaching people, remember that fact we talked about earlier about how football has shaped TV and broadcasting, the whole instant replay thing.
Oh, yeah. Think about it. The tech that lets us break down those key plays, see things from every angle, even overturn calls, it all started during a football game back in 1963.
I know. It's incredible that something so normal in sports now came from football. It just shows how the sport can push boundaries and be innovative.
It makes you wonder what other cool stuff will come from football in the future. But for now, let's shift gears a bit. Talk about something else that's central to the game. Not so much about technology, but about the passion and the community that surrounds football, especially at the high school level.
Ah, those Friday night lights. In some places like Texas, Florida, California, high school football is more than just a game. It's like the heart of the community.
You can't really explain it to someone who hasn't experienced it. The whole town rallies around their team, sharing the excitement, reliving those memories of playing under the lights.
It's not just the game itself either. It's the marching bands, the cheerleaders, those pregame traditions, tailgating with everyone. It's a whole thing.
Exactly. It's about those shared moments, families passing down their love for the game, that feeling of belonging.
And those high school stadiums, some of them are unbelievable. We mentioned the Allen Eagle Stadium in Texas, which cost a mind-blowing $60 million to build.
I know, right? It shows you how much those communities care about high school football. And it's not just about winning or losing. It's about teaching those young players about teamwork, discipline, perseverance.
Important stuff that they can take with them throughout their lives. But while we celebrate the excitement and community of high school football, we can't forget about the challenges, especially player safety.
That's right. We can't ignore the issue of concussions, the risks those repeated head injuries can have on players. It's been a big topic of discussion and has led to some changes in how the game is played.
It's really tough to think that a sport we love could have such serious consequences for those who play it. What are some of the main risks from concussions, especially for young athletes?
Well, a concussion is a brain injury, basically. It can disrupt how your brain normally works. The symptoms can vary from headaches and dizziness to problems with memory and focus. And in some cases, if someone has a lot of concussions, it can lead to what's called CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is a really serious brain disease.
That's pretty scary. It makes you think about the risks involved.
It is, and that's why we have to be really careful with concussions, especially for young athletes whose brains are still developing. The good news is there's been more awareness about concussions in recent years and a lot of effort going into preventing them.
I've heard about those new helmets they're making now that are designed to, like, absorb more impact. Are they making a difference?
The helmets are getting better for sure, and they're helping, but they're not perfect. Concussions can still happen, even with the best helmet.
So what else can be done to protect players? Especially at the high school level, where teaching those proper tackling techniques and just having that awareness is so important.
There's a lot more focus now on teaching players how to tackle the right way, leading with the shoulder instead of the head, things like that. Coaches are also being trained to spot the signs of a concussion and take a player out of the game right away if they think there's been a head injury.
And it's not just about the coaches, right? It's about educating everyone, the players, their parents, even the fans, about the risks.
You got it. It's about making safety the priority. It's good to see that the leagues at all levels are taking this seriously.
It sounds like a lot of work still needs to be done, but it's encouraging that changes are being made. This whole conversation about safety brings up a big question. How do we balance the risks that come with a contact sport like football with the benefits? It's great for fitness, teaches teamwork and character, but those risks are real.
That's the tough part, isn't it? It's about constantly weighing those risks and benefits and always making sure the well-being of the players comes first.
This is a conversation that needs to keep going, involving everyone, from players and coaches to parents and fans.
I agree. It's a shared responsibility to make sure that football is a sport that can be enjoyed safely for years to come. But while we talk about those challenges, let's not forget about all the cool new stuff that's happening in football, the things that are shaping its future.
You're talking about women's flag football, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing how popular it's getting. It's proving that football isn't just for guys.
It's true. Women's flag football is blowing up at every level, youth leagues, colleges, you name it.
Mhm.
And it's not just about participation. The level of skill and athleticism is incredible.
I've seen some highlights, and wow, these women are amazing athletes.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the sport. It's about empowering women, you know, breaking down those old ideas about who can play.
The NFL's behind it too, investing in women's flag football, showing that it's a great, fun, and safe option for young athletes.
It's awesome to see the NFL supporting that.
And they're not just focused on women's flag football. The NFL is going global, hosting games in London, Germany, Mexico. American football is becoming an international sport.
Wow, that's really interesting. I wonder how the game will change as it spreads to different cultures and countries.
It's an exciting time for football. So much is changing. It'll be interesting to see how those global influences affect the game and how it adapts.
So in this deep dive, we've covered it all. The origins, the changes, the impact on society, the challenges, and what the future might hold. So what's the big takeaway for our listeners?
I think it all boils down to this. American football, for all its ups and downs, it reflects America. It's about our values, our dreams, our struggles, even our victories. It's always changing, pushing limits.
Yeah. It's a sport that makes people feel things, argue, come together, whether they're in a packed stadium or watching at home on a Sunday night.
It's a sport with an incredible history and a future that's hard to predict, but it's definitely not over.
Absolutely. And we want to hear from you, our listeners. What are your thoughts? What parts of the game stand out to you? What questions do you have about its future?
We want to know. We'll be digging even deeper, talking about your questions and uncovering more about America's game after a quick break. You know, it's been really cool exploring all these different sides of American football with you. It's clear that this sport is always changing, not just on the field, but off the field, too.
Yeah, totally. We've talked about rule changes and technology and how player safety's become such a big focus. But there's also a shift happening in the culture of football, how people see it and who gets to play.
That's right. Like we were just saying, women's flag football is becoming hugely popular. It's awesome to see more women and girls getting involved and showing everyone that they can dominate this sport, too.
It's really changing things up.
Yeah.
It's bringing a whole new generation of players and fans into the mix. And speaking of reaching new audiences, the NFL going global is another fascinating development, isn't it?
No, for sure. They've had those games in London for a while, and now they're expanding into Germany and Mexico, too. I think it shows that the NFL is looking to the future. They see how big football can be worldwide.
It makes a lot of sense, honestly. Football has that universal appeal. It's athleticism, strategy, those moments of pure skill and teamwork that just leave you in awe.
Right. Those unbelievable catches, the game-changing interceptions, those last-second field goals. The drama is unreal, and everyone loves a good dose of drama.
For sure. But it's more than just the excitement. You know, there's something deeper there, something about the spirit of the game. I think football reflects a lot of what people associate with the American spirit, that drive to compete, that never give up attitude.
It's about pushing limits, challenging yourself, and those old ways of thinking. And those values, they speak to people everywhere, not just in America.
It's true.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm honestly amazed by the impact American football has had. It's more than just a sport. It's a cultural phenomenon. It reflects who we are, maybe even gives us a glimpse of where we're headed.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And as we've learned, it's constantly evolving, surprising us. Who knows what the future holds for football, but one thing's for sure. It's not going anywhere anytime soon.
And with that, we want to thank you, our listeners, for joining us on this deep dive into the world of American football.
We hope you learned something new, maybe saw the game from a different perspective.
We'd love to hear your thoughts. What resonated with you? What are you curious about?
Keep those conversations going. Because football, well, it's a reflection of us all, and its story is far from over.